Hello, and welcome to this political edition of Florida by the Numbers. I'm Alex Coelho, the Director of Data and Analytics here at the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to talk about what's happened across the political landscape of Florida over the past month. We have less than 6 months to go until the 2024 general election in November. And earlier this month, the Florida Chamber polled the voters of Florida to get their feelings on a variety of issues and the key races that will define this election. Right at the top of the ticket, in the race for President of the United States, we find former President Donald Trump with a 9-point lead over President Joe Biden in a head-to-head matchup in November. Trump holds 51% support, compared to Biden's 42%. This margin is significantly greater amongst Hispanic voters. Here, Trump holds a nearly 2-to-1 lead over President Biden, 58-31. Now, one addition to November's race that will play a factor is the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His third-party run, we find, would command 10% support amongst Florida voters when testing a three-way race amongst Trump, Biden, and Kennedy. Interestingly, Kennedy's support comes almost evenly from both Trump and Biden, as Trump maintains a 9-point lead in a three-way ballot test. Now, as we have less than 6 months to go, one of the questions will be whether or not President Biden can close that gap amongst Florida voters. And there are some ways that gap could shrink slightly. As of now, President Biden doesn't hold as much support within his own party as Trump does with his party. That would narrow the race slightly. But one of the challenges that Biden will have is the continuing growth of voter registration in Florida. As of April 30th, Republicans have now crossed the 900,000 mark in their lead amongst active registered voters over Democrats. We also see in the month-to-month numbers, Republicans continuing to out-register Democrats at a nearly 2-to-1 rate. As we get closer to November, that mark may hit 1 million voters before the general election. In the other key statewide race in Florida, the race for U.S. Senate, we find incumbent Senator Rick Scott with a 15-point lead over his likely Democratic opponent, former Congresswoman Debbie McCarcel-Powell. Scott's lead is 54%, McCarcel-Powell's 39%. And here as well, we find among Hispanic voters a much larger margin between these two candidates. Scott holds a lead of more than 2-to-1 amongst Hispanic voters over McCarcel-Powell. Now, one of the challenges in polling is always to find out whether or not something you're seeing is a real thing or sometimes statistical background noise. Amongst Hispanic voters, that's one of the questions going into November. But we can observe certain things that tell us that this trend of an increasingly Republican Hispanic electorate is more than just a polling trick. For example, recent electoral history in Miami-Dade and Osceola County show significant shifts towards Republicans in these two majority Hispanic counties. But we also see it amongst trends in voter registration. Amongst newly registered Hispanic voters, year over year, 2022 wound up being the first year in which more Hispanic voters registered Republican than Democrat. And when we look at the data that we have so far in 2024, that gap has grown significantly. Amongst newly registered Hispanic voters this year, Republicans are out-registering Democrats by a more than 2-to-1 margin, a significant shift from just a couple years ago. So this is one of the challenges Democrats will face as we continue on in this election cycle. Now, while the top of the ticket commands a lot of attention, there are thousands of races happening all across Florida, including key state legislative races. This year, all 120 Florida House, as well as 20 of the 40 seats in the Florida Senate, will be up on the ballot across the state. And for those races, qualifying is coming up quickly. From June 10th to June 14th, candidates for these races can qualify with the Division of Elections. Although as early as Memorial Day, candidates could begin pre-submitting qualification papers. Currently, there are over 350 active candidates for legislative races across the state. And several dozen of these candidates have already interviewed with the Florida Chamber Political Institute, the nonpartisan research arm of the Florida Chamber, dedicated to identifying pro-business candidates across the state. For more information on the Florida Chamber Political Institute, please contact Executive Director Marion Johnson. As we look to races beyond 2024, there are over 6,000 elected offices on the Florida ballot all across the state, from school board to governor. And for those races, the Florida Institute for Political Leadership is helping to train and identify the next generation of pro-business candidates across the state. We routinely hold training classes in various regions of the state of Florida, and if you'd like more information on these classes, please contact Andrew Wiggins. And if you'd like to help the Florida Chamber's political operations team continue to support and promote pro-business candidates and ideas across Florida and in all these key races, please contact our Executive Vice President, Frank Walker. And for any questions about this video or any of the latest trends in Florida politics happening now, please feel free to reach out to me at my contact information here. Again, for the Florida Chamber of Commerce, I'm Alex Coelho, thanking you for helping us continue to secure Florida's future.